What is going on, Pokemon community? It is Achilles018 here, and today we are continuing my mini-series on my top 7 Pokemon generations. Last time, we talked about my number 7 pick, Generation 3. You can check out the link in the description to watch that video if you want to get caught up. We're keeping it going today with my 6th favorite generation, and I'm super excited to talk about it, so let's go. Number 6. Generation 6. So many highlights here. Updated 3D graphics, a huge cast, a beautiful region, enhanced global trading, the incredibly important addition of the Fairy type to counterbalance overpowered dragons, as well as give Poison and Steel type Pokemon some added relevancy, and Mega Evolution. Where to begin? This was the first generation to have 3D graphics and environments to explore. While the camera angles have not aged well in my opinion, this switch to 3D reinvigorated many Pokefans, and I was among them. Just when I was starting to wonder when we would have an updated format for Pokemon graphics, Generation 6 was there, and at that time, it was marvelous. Generation 6 was really designed to be a bit of a reboot for the series and had several design homages to Generation 1 to emphasize this. Starting with the most important thing, at least for me, there have been a couple of times within the Pokemon main series lifespan where it was actually impossible to catch all available Pokemon and fill the national decks. With Generation 6, to include the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire games, it was possible to catch all 721 Pokemon available at that time by trading between these 4 games alone. Now, while I do not count the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire games as Generation 6 games, as I loop them in with their parent games from Generation 3, it's the Generation 6 functionality to complete the Pokédex I'm referring to here. Moving on to some smaller reboot homages, you have an opportunity to choose a second starter between Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle line from the Generation 1 games. The Santaloon Forest is a carbon copy of the Viridian Forest in the Kanto region. You can catch all 3 legendary birds from Kanto, and there's a cave that you enter similar to Cerulean Cave where you can encounter Mewtwo, just to name a few homages. The region itself was lovely, and though not quite as diverse as Hoenn in that the region is quite mountainous, so many of the areas share similar looking cliffs, ridges, and caves, for the most part, the towns and landmarks are average, with Comarine Town being my personal favorite. I had trouble with the concept behind Lumiose City though. The idea was clearly to make a grandiose city that would functionally serve as the central hub of the journey, and also to be visually the real wow factor of the region, and really show what fully realized 3D graphics were capable of outside of the standard Pokemon battle. The city itself was impressive, but could have been even more so were it not for ever-changing and ineffective camera angles that at times made it hard to tell what was in front of you, and if you were even going in the right direction to your destination. I had trouble finding the correct gates to routes, and at times, I even roller skated right past the Pokemon lab by accident. In regards to the Pokemon, it was the smallest regional dex we have seen so far, with just over 70 new species to discover. For the most part, the designs of these Pokemon were real winners, and starters as a whole were average, with Chespin being kind of basic, Fennekin having a disappointing evolution tree in my opinion, but all of this was more than made up for by quite possibly the best water starter of all time, Froakie, who would later turn into the immensely popular Greninja. The legendary Pokemon were average, with Volcanion being strong highlights. On to the cast. Let me start with my main point by saying I felt like the cast of characters in Generation 6 was my least favorite of any generation. I felt the gym leaders were not very memorable, with Ramos and Wulfric being low points. Professor Sycamore was highly memorable though, and was easily my favorite character in these games. AZ felt like an afterthought, and his story and the mystery surrounding him felt very forced, and to this day I still don't understand how his arc fits in. The rivals in my opinion are the poorest of any generation. The rival group was way too crowded, and with the exception of Shauna, none of them really had much personality, especially in the case of Trevor and Tierno. You never saw them much, and when you did, you blew by them so quickly it was comical, and there wasn't any time for character development with these guys, especially given their really one-dimensional dialogue. Team Flare is probably my least favorite evil team of any Pokemon game. They were just overly vibrant and goofy, and again, it took away from some of the immersion for me. But now onto the biggest mechanic change of Gen 6, Mega Evolution. This was a staple in Generation 6. From casual, story-driven play to the competitive meta, this was all anyone seemed to care about. For those who may not know, Mega Evolution was a new mechanic in Pokemon battling starting in Pokemon X and Y, in which a select few Pokemon could gain a temporary power-up by evolving even further than what we thought was possible. This stat boost was temporary because the evolution only lasted for the duration of the battle. Once the battle was over, your Pokemon returned to its original form. While this was quickly a fan-favorite feature, its drawback came in that it significantly limited the Pokemon you wanted on your team. What I mean by that is, of the 721 Pokemon available at that time of Generation 6, only 44 of them could Mega Evolve. That's only 6% of the total Pokemon population. My real complaint with Mega Evolution then was, what if my favorite fire type was Arcanine or Ninetales, and I preferred it over Charizard? With the now super cool Mega Evolution in the main game and how necessary it felt in the meta, I would almost be forced to leave my favorites behind in favor of this highly powered fire type alternative. I realize making a Mega Evolution for every Pokemon is not realistic, and that would be a tremendous amount of time, but it doesn't change the lack of variety seen in most teams. Mega Kangaskhan, anyone? Evidently, Game Freak heard my pleas because Generation 7 made some changes that fixed this one issue, but we'll talk about that in a later video. To wrap things up, Mega Evolution and 3D graphics were incredible highlights that deserve tremendous amount of praise, but the lack of variety in Megas and poor camera angles held these features back somewhat. While Game Freak would eventually revert back to a mostly fixed camera angle and also add more Megas in Omega Ruby and the Alpha Sapphire games, I don't count those toward this generation, so it doesn't count to help this particular critique. Beyond Megas and updated graphics, it's all downhill from here. Terrible frame rates and horde encounters, very meh legendaries, super convoluted storyline. Why is AZ even here? Why so many rivals? Team Flare makes me cringe. Diantha is easily the poorest champion with the weakest team. Friend Safari was great for shining hunting, but really was underwhelming as a concept. And the list goes on. Were it not for how important Mega Evolution and 3D graphics were, and especially how the 3D rendering has completely changed the way in which Pokemon games are played even to this day, this generation would be at the bottom of this list. But just barely. As I said when I started this series, despite my criticisms, I thoroughly enjoy these games. Pokemon X and Y reinvigorated my love for Pokemon, and I greatly appreciate these games. I have played through them several times, and I even completed my first living dex within these games. With that said, I just enjoyed the other generations more. So, Generation 6 is my 6th favorite Pokemon generation. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's Pokemon content as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to make better quality content for Poke fans just like you. If you want to join the conversation, leave a comment down below. I do read them. That's all for me. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you soon with more Pokemon content.